Welcome back to Venture 82. This time we're taking a journey back further in time than I would normally do. So it's 1781, January 1781, and it's early in the morning. It's about 7 or so, and the French have just landed in Jersey. And so begins the Battle of Jersey. Right, so like I say, it's 1781, 6th of January. So the French didn't waste any time with this. They docked in, well, I'm aware, 3 different places. So some split up and went off to the east and docked at the Rock. Some went off and docked up at the harbour up there and tried, we'll get to it, to take over Elizabeth Castle, and the rest went and docked in various other little ports around the island. However, they wasted no time in going straight to the main source of what they wanted to do, and they kidnapped at 8 o'clock in the morning the governor from his own bed, asleep. From there, the ones who had docked at the harbour in town had made their way here. They had taken over all the cannons for the island, surrounded this very market with the cannons, sealed themselves inside as a way to make sure that from whichever direction of these roads that approached around the market, the French then had the Jersey militia and the English covered. But it gets more interesting than this, because news of all this happening reached Major Pearson. Major Pearson, obviously not being overly impressed, gathered his men, of which there was 2,000, varying from Jersey militia to Highland soldiers who had been sent over by the Queen, and various other regiments that were over here at the time. 2,000 of them. And whilst he was around, he had sent all his men to meet up at Westmount, some of them coming from as far as St Peter's Barracks. You had 900 to 800 people that were then trying also to convince Captain Mulcaster, who was in charge of Elizabeth Castle, to give up the castle, to which he was refusing to surrender. Mainly because he knew that he had over 1,000 men in his castle, and before they'd actually surrounded the castle, a Jerseyman had managed to sneak over and tell him how many Frenchmen were surrounding him, so he knew he had them outnumbered. After getting these Frenchmen to then disperse, he then went and he sent half his men up to guard Fort Regent, or as it was known then, Le Mont de la Ville. And from up there, they then watched over the rest of the island. You can see how clearly it has a view over the island even now. That mountain up there, that's where the Fort Regent is. And from there, it got much worse. So then after this, they then moved into sending the governor down to see Major Pearson, who was now at this time gathered with all these troops at the top of Westmount. And they turned around and the governor gave him a message from the French, which was that unless him and all his soldiers surrendered the island to the French, that the French would have ransacked St Helier within half an hour. Major Pearson's response was that the French had 20 minutes to vacate the island. What happened next? I'll tell you in the next section. The French had no intention of leaving the island. So with that, Major Pearson sent his men to watch over at the harbour, part of them, and the rest of them were sent in various places, including Broad Street, to seal off all the roads and entrances in and out of town, to make sure there was no way that the French could now leave the island, because if they weren't going to leave off their own terms, then there was going to be have to be some sort of fight, and it was not going to end well for them. So all these places were sealed off, apart from one entrance which now no longer exists to the Royal Square, which was through was a little cut through in some shops that came out into the Royal Square. We shall go now quickly and we'll show you where that is. So as we come into the square, you can see there's a bit we've come in there, there's an entrance there, there's another one over here by the States building, there's one up the other end there which you can't see at the moment for the Christmas market, and there's the road up here. All these entrances to the market, every single one sealed off by the Jersey militia or British soldiers. And then once all these places were sealed up, bar the one which I'm about to show you where it was, which used to be here. It's now a back entrance into what's now the HSBC Bank. Here, which is now just an innocent looking giant black door. But this used to be a cut through and it went through onto the main street on the other side. So with this being the only entrance in and out of the Royal Square, that was when Major Pearson set his plan into action. So they took the one cannon they had left, one cannon that the French hadn't commandeered, and in one shot they took out most of the French within inside the market, and the rest that weren't there scrambled. And they scrambled the only direction they could, which was down the streets here and through and into the Royal Square. Then find themselves surrounded by over 1,000 British men to maybe, I think by the time they come into the square, it was looking at like maybe 1,000, probably more like about 500 to 600, no more than that, of the French. In fact, there were some British soldiers during the fighting that reported that even just a third of the British soldiers that were in this square waiting for them would have been enough to see the French off. The battle lasted all of 15 to 20 minutes. Most of the British soldiers had so little to shoot at, they were just shooting up in the air. There wasn't enough French people to shoot at. But in that small amount of time, the Battle of Jersey was done. But in the midst of the chaos, one stray bullet from a Frenchman hit Major Pearson, and it killed him on impact, which gives birth to probably the most iconic Jersey picture in history, painting wise, and that's the picture of Major Pearson's death in the Royal Square over there, which the exact place he died is actually now highlighted in the floor. It's marked out, which I'll go and show you in a moment. The war itself wasn't over yet though, because the French were still trying to battle their way in on the east side, down by La Roque. They were soon seen off over there as well, and it resulted in 600 Frenchmen being captured and just over 140 either injured or killed, and the rest scarpered. And it was one of quite a few attacks during those times of Jersey, but that was probably one of the worst ones. And that's a very brief insight into the Battle of Jersey. There are some interesting remnants of it though, and the reason I tell you this story is because there's things that still exist of that now, and those things are what I'm going to show you next. But yeah, you wouldn't imagine Jersey to have epic battles like that. You can try and imagine like what, 400-500 people in this little square here, just the French, and then another what, over 1,000 British soldiers. They I don't know how they were moving, and some of them were on horseback. Right, so as you can see, we have the Christmas market in place and Sod's Law. They're covering over the bit that shows you where Major Pearson died, which isn't ideal. However, there are still some things that I'd like to show you before we go on to the last part of this story. So, with that in mind, we'll just go over here. Now, one of the things that commemorates Major Pearson's sacrifice for the island of Jersey is the pub itself, called the Pearson, which in fact has a picture, as you can probably see there, on the side of it, of Major Pearson. But not a lot of people realise, locals do, but other people don't, is that if you look at the wall, this wall specifically, which has a thing here mentioning about the Battle of Jersey, you can look up here and you can see little round holes in the wall, and those are bullet holes from that battle back in 1700s. Now, the States have applied a few times to fill these holes in, these bullet holes, made by what would have been the little metal balls at the time that the pistols would have shot. But there's always been an outcry to leave it alone because it's part of our history. So with this is probably one of the only main remnants left of that time. So those bullet holes, when the bullets that are buried inside them, have been there now for what, almost 500 years. The other thing that I would like to show everybody is what happened to Major Pearson after all the dust settled, after everything had calmed down, after the French had been seen back to France where they came from, which Jersey people had a habit of doing a lot during the 1700s and the 1600s. So, and I'll take you to the last place on our journey, our short journey through the Battle of Jersey. I would also like to say, if you do want to know more about the Battle of Jersey, I would say the definitely the best place to go for that would be the Jersey Museum. Yeah, with that in mind, let's go to our last stop. Right, so Major Pearson was buried inside the church. I would show you, but in the middle of setting it up for Christmas, so I can't go in there. They're doing some sound tests and all sorts. But he's buried in front of the pulpit, and there's a stone which I'll put a picture up of for you now that says Pearson on it, that shows where his tomb is. And the gentleman who was in charge of the French that day is also buried here, just there. And there ends the Battle of Jersey. And like I say, a very brief outline for it. If you want all the military detailed information on it, there's plenty of books, and Jersey Heritage is a very good resource for looking it up. But until next time, it's goodbye from me, goodbye from Erica, who's obviously hiding behind the camera again because she always does. And I'm off to warm up because it's surprisingly cold today. Have a nice week, you guys.